Mike Walker. Welcome to Digital Markets Research Hub. We hear continuously in different conversations that the CMA is the leading authority in the world in terms of its competence, in terms of the delivery, the performance also. And you play a senior role there. You're a chief economic advisor. So maybe we can start with this introductory question, outlining your duties and the role of this division within the CMA.
Sure. So I'm the chief economist. That means that I run the economics team, which is currently about 160 economists in the CMA, mostly IO economists, some econometricians, some market researchers, some sort of non-IO microeconomists, labor economists, for instance. But what we do is all micro, so that's fine. So about 160 of us. So most cases that the CMA does will involve economic analysis. So any merger case, any sort of exclusionary behavior case, any market study, market investigation will involve economic analysis. The questions that competition policy asks are fundamentally economic questions. So we will be involved in those cases. The way we work within the CMA is that we have a single unified case team. So in any case, the economists will be working alongside the lawyers and alongside the data scientists, if they're involved, alongside the business analysts, to analyze the evidence and to help decision makers come to a decision.
And maybe as an academic, as a thinker, you as a IO enforcer or apply different methods, and maybe you can highlight to us, what do you think about the measurability of these complex economic facts and evidence? Are they discoverable in their kind of singular correctness, or they are interpretable? How wide the room of interpretation is? How do you evaluate the submission of conflicting evidence? Do you sense intuitively that there is some kind of cooking involved, or you have to rely on most kind of stable, neutral, measurable evidence? What's the role of, from thinking a kind of epistemic perspective, what's the role of economic evidence in this 21st century competition law and policy enforcement?
Okay, there's a lot of questions there, so I'll try and unpack them. So first of all, let's start with measurability. So to what extent can economics be used to measure outcomes? It depends, of course, on the nature of the case. There are lots of merger cases, for instance, which are mergers in quite established industries, quite static, slow-moving industries, where we can probably get a pretty good handle using economic analysis on what will happen to prices, quality, innovation, investment after the merger. Using our sort of standard IO tools, we can apply a Bertrand model to the market perhaps, and we can get some elasticities, and we can work out diversion ratios. We can give a decent estimate for what's going to happen after the merger. Absolutely, sometimes we can do that. Sometimes we will have a exclusionary behavior case where you're looking at what was the effect of the behavior that happened in the past. Again, then economic analysis allows us to make some pretty reasonable judgments as to around measuring the effect of that behavior. Not always, but often. But of course, there's a whole range of cases where that's not true. And if we think particularly nowadays, where at least at the CMA, we're increasingly enforcing in cases around innovation concerns. So concerns that this is a merger that will reduce innovation in future. By nature of that question, there's a high degree of uncertainty. So if we think about, take a case we've done in this field, Illumina PacBio as a case in human genome sequencing. Okay, details don't matter. The key thing there was there was a little bit of competition between the two parties at the time of the merger. There wasn't a lot. Illumina 95% of the market, PacBio less than 5% of the market, and they operated in different sectors of the market. But they were both involved in innovating to try to be the leaders in the next generation of genome sequencing. And genome sequencing is an industry where there's been lots of innovation. 10 years ago, it cost $10 million to sequence a human genome. Now it's less than $1,000. Okay, so that's the case where we provisionally decided to block the merger, and then the parties abandoned because we thought it would damage innovation in future and that would be harmful to consumers. Now, can I tell you that that's definitely correct? No, of course I can't. It might be that actually the competition, the innovation competition between PacBio and Illumina doesn't generate new innovation. Or it might be that actually Illumina was going to win that race anyway, regardless of whether or not they own PacBio. So yeah, I can't measure that. I'm not going to pretend to be able to measure. What I can measure is I can measure the incentives of the firms involved. And I can understand using internal documents, economic analysis that, okay, Illumina had a existential concern that it was not going to be the first innovate in the next generation technology. It was worried about the type of innovation PacBio was doing, long read technology, and therefore it had an incentive to take PacBio out of the market. That bit I can measure, those incentives. And of course, if we're thinking about digital regulation, which is of course coming in, has come in Europe, it's coming in the UK, again, we're going to be trying to make decisions sometimes on existing behavior. Okay, we can get a handle for that, but a lot of the time on how existing behavior or existing market structure is going to affect future long-run dynamic competition. And we can't measure that precisely. Look, if we can measure that precisely, we wouldn't be in the competition authority, we would be making a lot of money on the stock market.
And just to finish with this kind of interdisciplinary misunderstanding, misconceptions which accompany the convergence of legal and economic side of the profession. Did you observe, you participate in different events continuously, do you observe any kind of meaningful change in how economics perceives its boundaries, essentially, cognitive boundaries, and its role after the kind of the monopolistic, omnipotent decades of law and economics kind of, or more economic approach towards more kind of pluralistic, multipolar, or whatever the word would be, new reality?
So look, I'm obviously always speaking on my own behalf. So I'm not speaking on behalf of CMA, I'm not speaking on behalf of the profession. I think the answer to your question is yes, that there has been a change. How much has the profession accepted that is an interesting question. So let's think about what the change is. Look, there's definitely a strong critique that is being made of the use of some of the use of economics in competition policy. So we know that the new Brandesians and people like Lena Khan and Jonathan Cantor in the US would argue that economics and the focus on economic efficiency has been a misdirected focus of competition policy. Now, they make some strong points when they say it's not all about price, but I don't think the economics profession ever thought consumer welfare was all about price. I've never met an economist who thought that. But we clearly gave the impression that we did, and that's on us. Okay, so that's the problem. Solve the problem. I think certainly in the US, there is now, no, so I'll go back. The more economic approach to competition policy that you mentioned that sort of came in and talked about in Europe in the sort of mid-2000, 2005 onward, Neelie Kroes was the commissioner then. And the idea of getting more economics into, well, Article 82, then was Article 102, so more economics into anti-competitive behavior cases. Some of us at the time said that's not the right direction to go. I can remember very clearly saying a couple of conferences, we don't need more economics in Article 82, we need some decisions. And one of the things that economics has done, I think, to anti-competitive behavior investigations, so abuse of dominance in particular, is to make them almost undoable for agencies, because they have put such a high evidence bar, high proof bar onto the agencies. And we see the result is that cases take forever and they get appealed forever. Intel, the original complaint in that case was 2003. We're still in the appeal stage. In the UK, we had some cases around excessive pricing, which I could explain to our 3-year-old dog in about 2 minutes. And yet somehow those cases went on for years and years, and we got appealed and we won the appeals, and then the appeal was appealed and we won that. But it just took forever, and there's a bunch of economists involved who I don't think covered themselves in glory, because they were, to a large extent, trying to defend what seems to be pretty indefensible and clear anti-competitive behavior. So the economic profession hasn't always helped itself. Now, Jonathan Cantor at the Fordham conference a couple of weeks ago made a very strong critique of, and this is a US focused critique, but it's still relevant to us, critique of how economics is used in a lot of cases in the US. And of course, they have a court-based approach, so you often get the battle of the experts. But and so there's a standard criticism. Look, these independent experts, they're not acting as independent experts, they're advocating for their client. That's not what they should be doing. Correct, not what they should be doing. A good expert doesn't do that. But he also raised the question of whether funding, university funding by corporates, is leading to a bias in the type of research that is done and the results that research finds, and that is corrosive. I'm not well placed to comment on that in the US, but if it's true, it's clearly a problem. It certainly is true that lots of experts are not great at highlighting their potential conflicts of interest, or highlighting where their fundings come from, or highlight which clients they've worked for in the past. And again, I think that's bad. It's bad practice, and I think it is bad for the profession as a whole. Okay, that's one set of issues. I think there is, and I think this comes under your question, a whole different set of issues, which is about the scope of economic analysis within competition policy, and maybe actually the scope of competition policy. And if this isn't a question, then just tell me. Which is around the extent to which competition policy as a whole needs to look a bit more widely than just looking at competition within narrowly look at competition within markets. And the sorts of arguments we hear here are, look, competition policy should be part of industrial policy, and so you need to take account of the wider industrial policy landscape, and maybe we should allow mergers that lead to large national champions, the sort of the Siemens Alstom type argument. Now, national champion arguments are just a bad argument. Okay, always have been, always will be. Part of those. The idea, however, that competition policy should be part of a government's industrial policy strikes me as obviously true, and has always been true. Competition policy is about making markets work efficiently and be competitive. Competitive markets generate lower prices, they generate increases in innovation, they improve productivity. All of these things are good for economic growth, and sustainable economic growth is what industrial policy is about. So I absolutely think that competition policy is part of industrial policy. That doesn't mean we do things dramatically different, I don't think, from how it's been done in the past. I think it's just an acceptance that within that framework, obviously, competition authorities should be thinking about working in areas where they can have the most benefit for consumers as a whole, and that goes to privatization. And I think that's that sort of should be uncontroversial, but that's sort of the extent to which we get involved in industrial policy.
But if you look how looking at the mechanics of the process, how to build effective, useful relationship bridges with the broader governmental agenda, let's say economic agenda. In the past, again, thinking that we are discovering the truth with capital T, which is discoverable in its totality pretty much, the logic was quite intuitive and easy to follow. give us as much autonomy as possible. The more autonomy, the better. Any influence is considered almost automatically as a kind of noise, polluting the clarity of our calculus. Now we cannot go to another extreme. We cannot be somehow embraced, but probably there must be some, it should be thematized. How you as an enforcer, should you be mindful of the priorities? Should you intuitively sense them? Leaving aside, obviously, nobody would expect the government giving you instructions, interfering into your procedural autonomy, but how to streamline this communication? Or do you think the competition enforcers have sufficient awareness as citizens or as enforcers about the broader goals?
Okay, so in the UK, as part of the regime, government gives us what they call a strategic steer. Beginning of every parliament, we get a strategic steer. So I guess we have a new government. So I guess that means we'll be getting sent a new strategic steer at some point in the future. And that strategic steer, what that does, it just highlights the sort of things the government thinks we ought to be looking at. It's entirely non-binding. We can completely ignore it. I think that'd be stupid, but we could completely ignore it. And it's a way for government to signal to us the areas they think we should be concerned about. And historically, the steers we've been given at CMA have been entirely sensible and highlighted stuff that we agree with. Now, in terms of, but as I say, it's non-binding, so government's not telling us what to do. But I think it's helpful for them to tell us what they think, what areas it's good for us to look at. Now, in terms of particular cases, again, I mean, the government doesn't tell us to do a particular case or not. That's absolutely not its role. Although, note, there are people who can tell us what cases to do in the UK. So, we can have, one of the regulators can refer a case to us and we have to look at it. There are some consumer bodies that have powers to make what's called a super complaint and send stuff to us, and we have to look at it. Okay? So we should be aware of that. But if government sometimes will say to us, look, we're concerned about this market or this issue, could you think about looking at it? And sometimes, we'll have discussions. Sometimes we'll say no, sometimes we'll say yes. I think that's perfectly reasonable. So if we just look at a few recent examples, the last government asked us to look at house building in the UK. Okay, there's a general concern that the house builders were restricting supply of new build housing in order to push up prices. Okay, that's a coherent concern. Okay? So we did our analysis, we published our market study into house building, and basically what we found is that story is not right. The house building is slow, but it's slow because we have a planning system which is dysfunctional and makes, therefore, new building, getting planning permission to build houses very, very slow, particularly large developments. And to the extent that there are rents flying around, they are probably going to the people who own the land. I think that's a useful study. And one of the things it does is it both informs government and it sort of busts some myths. So the idea house builders are acting anti-competitively, I think we put that to bed. But planning is a problem. And this government has come in and been really explicit. We're going to try and sort out the planning regime. Okay, I'll give you one more example. The last government asked us to look at retail fuel, so petrol and diesel pricing. And there's concern that that market had become less competitive over time and that petrol retailers or petrol prices were not reflecting changes in wholesale costs. And in particular, there's a concern that when wholesale costs, so the oil cost went up, prices of petrol and diesel went up very quickly. And when wholesale costs went down, prices only came down slowly. So-called rockets and feathers analysis. Okay. Now, the Office of Fair Trading looked at this issue 15 years ago, found there's no problem. We looked at this issue a bit ago, found there's no problem. Government asked us to do this. Personally, I'm thinking, what a waste of our time. But, okay, government's asked us to do it. It's not entirely unreasonable. CMA decided to do that. What have we found? We actually found there has been a change in the market. If you look up to the end of 2022, changes in wholesale costs, oil costs, were fully reflected in petrol and diesel prices, and they were fully reflected at the same rate. So it took a little bit of time, but basically over 5-6 weeks, any wholesale price changes are fully reflected in prices. Okay, so you do the analysis and stop at the end of 2022. That's what you find. And you stop at the end of 2021. That's what you find. If you now include data for 2022 and 2023, and you rerun the data, you find something different. This is all in our published study. You find two things. One, you find that actually increase in wholesale prices are reflected in retail prices more quickly than reductions, and also that we no longer seem to have 100% pass through. In both directions, we seem to have about 80% pass through of wholesale price changes. Okay, both of those indicative of a market has become less competitive. Okay, we've done all of our sort of analysis of internal documents, etc., and we know why this happened now, which was Asda, supermarket, also petrol retailer, market leader in terms of setting their prices, had an explicit decision, internal decision, we are going to price petrol less competitively. So we're happy to stop being the market leader. We want to increase the margin we earn on petrol, and that fed through the whole market. So that's an example of the government asked us to look at something reasonable. We could have said no. We said yes. We looked at it and we discovered something important we didn't know, and now we're imposing remedies to try and sort that problem out. That seems to me good interaction between government and competition authority. The government at no point told us find a problem in retail fuel. They asked us, is there a problem in retail fuel?
Amazing. Let us move to the digital. And we have impressive, juristically, in terms of its potential, long-awaited act, Digital Markets Competition and Consumers Act. First of all, let me ask you, what do you think about it? Not about the substance, but in terms of did it get in the final form? Does it comply with your expectation? Did you get what you wanted to get ultimately?
Okay, well, that does sound to me like a substance question. Do I think that it's good for us to have digital regulation in the UK? Yes, I do. Do I think that the digital markets unit that has been set up as a result of the DMCC is being given the right set of powers within the right broad regime? Yes, it makes sense to me. Do I think the tests that we are going to be able to apply and the remedies we're going to be able to impose are sensible? Absolutely. So on the digital side, yeah, that all makes sense to me. Again, this is my views.
Even Section 5.
Sorry?
Even the 5-year forward-looking evaluation for designating with strategic market status. Are you not concerned with this 5-year forward-looking and then the undertake and say, look, they didn't evaluate everything, and thus we challenge the designation itself?
Okay, I'll come back to that in one moment.
Okay.
Let's go for the other side of that act, the consumer powers, which broadly speaking moves the consumer regime closer to the Competition Act regime. I mean, that makes sense to me as well. Okay, so your specific question around SMS designations. So the concept of an SMS designation seemed to me to make sense. This idea as to whether firms have a strategic market status or strategic market position. Historically, we might have called that significant market power, but that is strategic in the sense that it covers a wide or has effects across a wide range of digital markets. That makes sense to me. Okay, so you're talking about, we do that, and then we look at a particular firm and service that firm provides. Maybe we do decide that firm has strategic market status. There's all implications to that. I'll come to those. And then I think your concern is that we have to then look at it again in 5 years. Is that your concern?
My understanding that one of the criteria of a designation with strategic is the possession of the undertaking the strategic market position, and if it and the requirement is to look forward 5 years for it is 5 years forward looking assessment. Nobody can guess what would happen in 5 years time.
Yeah. Okay. Now I don't have any problem at all with that, because what we're talking about in firms with entrenched market power. So of course we're making a forward-looking judgment because this is regulation, and if you're going to impose regulation that's going to impact on the firm and the market in the future, you must be making a future judgment. Now, are we being asked to look ahead and see what the market outcomes are going to be in 5 years' time with certainty? Of course, we're not. We can't do that. Are we being asked to say, is this a firm whose current market position and with the barriers to entry into that market and whose incentives and incentives of others and the technology, etc., are such that you expect this position is likely to remain in place in 5 years' time, absent some sort of behavior, some sort of imposition of regulation? That seems to me a perfectly sensible thing for us to be asked to do. After all, we're doing mergers all the time. We look forward, and if we have a merger that, in principle, you have a merger which is, sort of going to have a bad effect on consumers on day one after the merger, but because of entry, that bad effect will disappear quite quickly, then we allow that merger. That means we merger have there seems to sort of ad hoc be a 2-year time horizon. I don't think that's in any piece of legislation. So here, I think it's perfectly reasonable. And I think you also mentioned parties appealing. I think, I suspect, if we do make SMS designations, then some firms will appeal their designations, at least with respect to some services. And that's fine. That's part of the regime. Then we're going to have that argument in court.
Okay. So, because my probably paranoid anticipation would be that they said that you made a manifest error, not that your crystal ball gaze in 5 years forward-looking evaluation was not accurate, and then you somehow amplify a specific micro difference, saying that, look, it's manifest now, everything is changed.
Yeah.
But
okay, so that so I'm going to interrupt you, mate, because that type of argument, which look, maybe the party might make, rests on a really fundamental misunderstanding of what a competition authority or what a regulator does. Okay, and it's a widespread misunderstanding. Notably, Marcus Smith, president of the CAT, has publicly had the same misunderstanding, saying, well, competition authorities and the CMA, it looks into a crystal ball and it doesn't have a crystal ball. It can't do, it shouldn't be doing that. And that's just wrong. We don't look into a crystal ball. We take the available evidence now and make our best assessment of what that implies for the nature of competition and therefore the range of outcomes in future. That's not looking to a crystal ball and saying, I have predicted the future. That is taking seriously the questions we are asked, which, in a merger, for instance, is, do you think with more than 50% probability this will harm consumers, this merger, or with a more than 50% probability this will be good for consumers? Okay. If we have to make that judgment, we don't claim crystal ball. We just do our best on the available evidence. We're going to be in the same position with digital market unit, with one big exception or difference, which is, with a merger, for instance, it's a one-shot exercise. Merger comes in, you think it's bad merger, you impose some remedies. Okay. Those remedies may or may not work. You may have been wrong about your assessment. Under this sort of regulation, we've come to an assessment. We think the firm got SMS a particular service, so we impose some remedies, and they don't work. Okay, fine, we can change them. Or they prove to be unnecessary. Okay, we can remove them. It's no longer a one-shot game. I think that's an important difference.
Okay, you use my mind. Moving to the competences, new competences with which the Act or extended competences which the Act assigns to the CMA and DMU, this informal unit within the CMA. Do you, first of all, maybe you can say whether you see, because some people say that, well, it's not that wide. Some others would say that the competences have been extended significantly, and thus you have much richer apparatus and toolbox. So this would be a crystal ball gaze then, essentially. Now, my question is, do you think that the CMA will limit itself to more kind of conservative remedying of market failures, or the tools at least allow you to go more proactively and somehow engaging into uncharted water of tailoring market, shaping competition, creating maybe even competition. We don't know how to, and if
Okay.
yes, how to do it.
Neither could be. So we're not. I don't think. Again, this is me speaking, not CMA. We're not sort of going to be very conservative. I think just trying to apply the powers narrowly. If you look at the website, around the gov.uk website, around the DMU, sort of the mission statement right at the top of that says, DMU is there to help open up digital markets. And that is the main aim of the Digital Markets Unit. It's not to impose any particular outcome on the market, but to ensure that where there's an entrenched position of market power, that position of market power cannot be left unchallenged by new firms coming in, new firms for innovative businesses. That entrenched market power cannot be extended into neighboring markets, again, stopping innovative entrants being successful. We had seen a history of some firms using their entrenched market power to squash any threat to that entrenched market power. So this is the idea that you have your core bit of market power, and then you sort of you build a wall around it by extending your ecosystem, and then you build a moat around that by extending a bit further, and maybe have a minefield. What we're going to do is just open that up. So think about something like Google search. I have no problem at all if Google remains a dominant company in search or whatever follows search in 10 years' time, as long as it remains the leader after we have seen a process of competition to get to whatever the next innovation, the next iteration of search is going to be. What I don't want to happen is Google to be the market leader because there's some other firms came in some great ideas and Google bought them or Google squashed them, And I say Google, but I'm not pejoratively being against Google. It could be any firm with SMS, strategic market status, substantial market power in these areas. So it is all about opening up the markets. Now, that is not market design, I don't think. But equally, it's not very conservative. We'll just try and fix a few small market failures.
Okay, I got it. But you would never think of going into market design. So this is kind of a boundary, the new extended boundary, going far beyond the conservative, opening up the markets without looking into kind of micromanaging what would be the implication. What if a company, kind of big tech from authoritarian regime, will take over these are beyond the considerations, or maybe only on the margins, so to say.
Okay, so the powers we have, so there are two different types of things we can do if we find there's SMS in the market. One, we can impose what are called conduct requirements on the firm. But those conduct requirements are very much sort of consumer protection type things. So to make sure consumers have full information when they're making purchases, to make sure consumers or businesses have the ability to switch away from that service to another service without being punished for doing so. To make sure that you have, particularly between a platform and businesses, you have standard fair dealing. The platform isn't using its market power to exploit the business. So we have conduct requirements, but they're very much sort of consumer protection type requirements. And then we have PCIs, which are promoting competition interventions, and that's about opening up the market. And those are things like potentially, we talk about these in documents, things like requiring firms to share data, requiring an SMS firm to share data that it has acquired as a result of its interactions with its consumers or businesses, or interoperability, allowing firms to interoperate with the large platforms, and in particular, not allowing the large platform to allow smaller firms to interoperate until it becomes a competitive threat, and then remove that interoperability. Something that Facebook did a number of times, notably with Vine. Those, I don't think that's market design. That's just market opening.
No, at least I infer by suggesting market design much more interventionist, and you have made it very clear that's not the way you see it. Okay, thank you for this. Maybe
can I just say two things? One, I think it would be a fool's errand to try and do that. But secondly, I think this is important. There's a legitimacy issue. You know, if anybody is going to try and do market design around some of these platforms, it shouldn't be a small island off the coast of Europe. We don't, I think, have the legitimacy to make those sorts of global policy decisions. At a minimum, seems to me, those decisions should be made by large jurisdictions, and you sort of think by the jurisdictions where those companies are based. That would be if you're really going to go in for serious market design activity.
Another mechanism which attracts attention of many commentators is the final offer mechanism. And I imagine its use will be somehow related to mandatory access, maybe access to data. The intuition directs us to IP lawyers, where they have these front terms being used continuously, but many of them who have connections with competition law say that it's completely different animal because implementers already use patents, and then the discussion is about much more tangible things which are already known, whereas with data, access to data is much less known territory.
The final offer mechanism, the idea behind these things is that where you have two firms who are bargaining over something and they can't come to an agreement, they're going to go to binding arbitration. And as part of that binding arbitration, they have to make a final offer, what they think the right price is, let's say. And then the arbitrator can just choose one or other price, but can't decide, oh no, I'll go in the middle. Okay. There's a load of economic literature on why final offer mechanisms are a good way of getting firms to reveal their true valuation of the product. And I won't go into the technicalities of it, but at an intuitive level, firms don't want to be, if you're going to have, you make your final offer and then you're still going to be bargaining, and the arbitrator's going to be deciding in the middle. Intuitively, you have an incentive to put your prices out here and hope that the judge comes in somewhere around here. Final offer mechanism removes that incentive, because if the right answer is here and one firm bids here and the other firm bids here, you know where you're going to end up. So the mechanism in theory is a good mechanism. How it will actually work in practice, let's wait and see. I think it's particularly relevant, though, to the issues we've heard about and seen in places like Australia and Canada around publishers feeling, I think probably legitimately, that they are not being properly compensated by the big platforms for their data and their intellectual property.
Yeah, thank you very much for this clarification. Another issue which attracts a lot of attention is regulatory dialogue or multi-law, given that we have different...
Is regulatory?
Is a regulatory dialogue or multi-law, because we have different participants, so to say, with which you are expected to engage continuously and simultaneously. Yeah. So I was wondering about the tonality. Can we anticipate a more amicable attempt to find the expected outcomes, to achieve the happy medium, not in the middle, but the expected outcomes which was desirable for the CMA in the least somehow turbulent, antagonistic way? And do you expect the designated undertakings to somehow to be more prone, more inclined to this modality, or you somehow already see behind the horizon the attempts to challenge and go and become more hostile and go to kind of to more judicial solutions?
Okay. So the first point to make is this is a really important issue. So we are a competition authority that's going to take on a regulatory role with respect to digital markets. For us, that's a very different position to be in, and I'm not, and we need to be very aware of that. Regulators frequently have a problem that they get captured by the firms they're regulating. Competition authorities typically don't have that because they don't have repeat relationships with the firms that they deal with. Now we are going to have repeat relationships with the firms we deal with. It is very important that we are alive to the dangers of regulatory capture by either side, because regulatory capture is not going to be good for consumers. So definitely, it is an important issue. Okay, then you are talking about this sort of this participative approach that has been highlighted that we've talked about. So my interpretation of what that should mean is it's participative in the sense that we are going to talk to and listen to all sides of the debate, and we are going to ensure that we, sort of optimize the information set that we get hold of in order to make our decisions. Still, we are going to be making our decisions, and firms will sometimes disagree with those. I would be extremely concerned if actually what ends up happening is that we end up just sort of doing a bunch of deals with the firms. And sometimes when people talk about participative antitrust, I slightly worry that that's what it means. It's another word for regulatory capture. But I think we're alive to that issue, and we just need to make sure, to the extent possible, we don't get captured. But it is harder than when you're a competition authority. You can't get away from that, and you look at regulators, other regulators in the UK, for instance. If you are working those regulators, one of your exit routes when you want to change jobs is often to go and work in the industry because that's where your expertise is. That's problematic. Okay, so your final bit of the question was, do you think we're going to have antagonistic relationships or not with various firms? Okay, let's wait and see. I'm just going to observe from the European experience of the DMA, is I suspect the answer will vary from firm to firm. Okay, as an outsider observing what the European Commission have been doing with the DMA, it looks like the relationship between the Commission and Apple, for instance, is very antagonistic. Whereas I don't hear that, again, sort of reading the press, of their relationship between the other firms that they have designated as being gatekeepers. So I imagine it'll differ from firm to firm. What will be important is, assuming that's what happens also in the UK, some firms, much more antagonistic than others, is that we don't get into a world where antagonism pays. So I'm sure, I have no inside information here, I am sure the Commission is very well aware on all the battle it's having with Apple around app stores, that A, it has to win that battle, and B, it cannot be seen to give Apple a better deal because Apple have been complaining a lot. If it gives Apple a better deal, it's because the facts suggest a better deal should be given to them. Because otherwise, you're just going to undermine the system from the beginning.
If I may, just to clarify, ask you to clarify the issue on capture. There are 50 shades of capture, starting with outright corruption and ending as, that amicable, charming person, interpersonal relationship. But the boundaries of striking the deals with the undertakings, I wanted to ask, for example, as an economist, if an undertaking, a multi-billion undertaking, comes to this regulatory dialogue communication facility and says, okay, we are happy to comply with the letter of law and with the spirit of what you expect us to do without circumventing, etc., on the requirement A, B, C, but this would lead in our changes in our business model to some extent, which will make us more vulnerable vis-a-vis other potential investigations in next year. Can it be part of this kind of deal where essentially the CMA will say, okay, once you achieve A, B, C, D, which we would know that if you do it in a more hostile way, will take a lot of our resources, time, and consumers will be worse off. We will somehow refocus our attention for the next 2 years or whatever the compromise is, and we will not be looking at the issue which is potentially hypothetically problematic, which you will somehow expose yourself voluntarily as a result of this internal communication. So this more sophisticated calculus, is it somehow on the table, or it's purely sci-fi scenario?
Okay, so this is the idea that the CMA might impose some set of conduct requirements or PCIs on an SMS platform, on the understanding that if the platform accepts those undertakings, that we won't investigate what the platform's doing somewhere else. I think that's what you're saying. To which the answer is, I really hope not. That would seem to me to be a very bad place to be. And generally, when I think about regulatory capture, I mean, you're right. There's a whole gamut from outright corruption to just getting very cozy with people who you start to treat as your friends. But the way I think about this as an economist is regulatory capture is where you're basing your decisions too much on one party's sort of information set that they have provided you with, and that's the important thing we have to ensure that doesn't happen, because of course, if we're looking at a large platform, it's going to have loads of data, loads of information, which is absolutely crucial to our analysis, and they will provide it to us. But there's also evidence that we should be taking into account from competitors, from small startups, from consumer bodies. And I think the most dangerous capture, in the sense of the capture that can happen almost without you noticing, is that you focus on the great big data sets you're getting from the incumbents who've got all the money, and you don't focus on the less imperfect, incomplete data from the other stakeholders. And yeah, it may be imperfect, it may be incomplete, but it's a different viewpoint, and it's important you take that viewpoint into account.
Speaking of other landmark investigations or other landmark activities in digital markets, can you highlight to us what to expect?
Okay, so we've got digital markets unit is coming into place in the UK, so we'll be starting to look at potential designations of platforms. We have a market investigation going on into cloud computing, which was an investigation that was referred to us by Ofcom, the telecoms regulator, and broadly around concerns around it's a very concentrated market. You've got three hyperscalers: Microsoft, AWS, and Google. And particular concern Ofcom had, this is all public information, was around egress fees, was around how expensive it is to take your data away. So we have published some working papers in that study. We'll be publishing our provisional findings later this year, and then come to the final decision next year. So that I can't tell you what decision we're going to make, apart from anything. I'm not a decision maker, but that's going on. We have the mobile ecosystem market investigation going on. So this is a piece of work that came out of our market study into mobile ecosystems. That study highlighted a mobile ecosystem. This is basically the Apple and Google ecosystem. So Apple with device, operating system, iOS, App Store, and everything. Google not with the devices basically, but with the operating system, Android and Play Store, etc. And we found a load of concerns in that area, and I expect some of those concerns will be dealt with by the digital markets unit. But we're also doing a market investigation into some of those concerns, particularly around mobile browsers and cloud gaming. A general concern that we found in the market study is that, particularly on Apple, any browser on Apple has to be run on Apple's browser engine, WebKit, and there's some evidence that we thought that Apple might have restricted the functionality of WebKit in order to restrict the functionality of browsers, and in particular in order to restrict the ability of browsers on an Apple phone to allow you to cloud game rather than having to download the app where Apple gets the money and play the game that way. Again, so we've issued some working papers, that will be going on. So those are two investigations that are definitely going on at the moment. We are looking, it's all very public, at a number of sort of mergers in the foundation model space. So particularly mergers, for instance, the Microsoft OpenAI, not even clear whether it's a merger, that's the question that we're having to answer. Google Anthropic, Amazon Anthropic, and there's sort of concerns here about whether some of these deals might be anti-competitive because they will allow the hyperscalers to get a very strong position in a related market, the market for foundation AI models, because one of the things that you need to have a foundation AI model is access to enormous amounts of compute power, and the hyperscalers have that. Again, I'm certainly going to tell you what the outcome of those cases is going to be, because they are ongoing, but there will be an outcome. I think those are the Oh, I guess there's another one, Google Sandbox, Privacy Sandbox case, which is ongoing, where this is the final case to talk about, which is where Google a couple of years ago now said it was going to deprecate third-party access to is going to deprecate third-party cookies within Chrome. Doesn't matter what that means. Bottom line is good for privacy, bad for competition. We've been working with Google to find a solution which we get privacy benefits, but without losing competition benefits. That's an ongoing case. But it's an interesting case in the sense that from the beginning of that case, Google has been really clear with us and publicly that it wants to find a solution to this problem. It understands the problem that it will then roll out globally. So one of the difficulties of that is that we have to have a solution that works globally.
The CMA engages with academics, with economists and lawyers on continuous basis, and you read a lot of academic papers. Maybe you have again purely personal reflections about things which common mistakes in terms of style, maybe, or too wide focus, too narrow focus. Maybe some tips to those who are now searching for next big research project, how to make it more impactful potentially and more approachable by the CMA.
So we do interact with academics a lot. It would be a rare week where we don't have an academic seminar. And you're right, we talk to academics, we have an academic panel. If you are interested in doing research and you want that research to be relevant to competition policy, and particularly relevant to how CMA to look at competition policy, then a good starting point is to interact with our microeconomics unit. So this is a unit we set up. It's based in Darlington, and it's purely doing economic research. The people there, about 15, 17 of them, don't work in cases. They do economic research. So, for instance, they published earlier this year a piece on competition in labour markets in the UK because there's a policy discussion about that, and we felt we actually wanted to know some facts about the market rather than just relying on the facts of the US. We will be publishing soon a piece of research from there on the sort of state of competition in the UK to look at concentration, markups, entry and exit, that sort of things across the whole economy. One of the things that unit has done, it published its research priorities. Again, that's a document. You can find it on the web. And that highlights, I think it's 7 areas that the unit is interested in and essentially looking at. So that's a relevant document to look at, see what sort of things we're interested in. And of course, you can just contact the unit. When we publish our state of competition report, which will be, I think, next month, or maybe early November, but I think next month, then that will also include prescriptions or follow-up work we're thinking of doing. And again, be a good thing for IO researchers, they want to do this sort of public policy work, to look at those and again think about how they might contribute to that.
And speaking of students who want to join the DMU, I know you run a lot of webinars and very helpful discussions where members of the team explain the work there, so they're very approachable in this regard. But maybe there are some, and the CMA is known globally for having such wide interdisciplinary team of experts, but maybe still there is kind of shortage, which as kind of a curious student can put the task to complete in a couple of years' time. Is there any specific combination of knowledge which would be of particular demand, or maybe some tips more generally to students?
Well, okay. So the economic side, we just want to hire good microeconomists. So if you're a good microeconomist and want to work in government, then apply as and when jobs are advertised. At an organizational level, I mean, technologists and data scientists are very expensive because they have such fantastic outside options, notably with big tech. And so that is a scarce resource that I am sure we are going to be wanting to hire more of in future.
Mike Walker, thank you very much for this very informative conversation.
Thank you.